That's where the bail application for Sylvester Roy Mphephu is continuing at the Johannesburg Magistrate's Court. He's accused of killing his girlfriend, Palesa Matlamela. The economic freedom fighters and anti-gender-based violence activists are protesting outside the court, calling for him to be denied bail. Tumaole Mohlaoli is following developments there, and he joins us from the court. Tumaole, perhaps let's start with an update from inside the court. Any word on whether he will be granted bail or not?
Well, this is where the proceedings are currently underway. The court had just adjourned for a short lunch break, and before lunch break we had heard how the state, of course, would oppose the bail application because of the seriousness of the matter here. However, Mphephu's legal team argued that Mphephu is a law-abiding citizen and in fact handed himself over to authorities shortly after that incident whereby the victim died at the hospital. Now this is the matter that is now just being debated before court, and we heard from one of the state witnesses, who is Constable Lakili Shabane, and Lakili Shabane did not give initially such an impressive account of himself in terms of some of the statements that he made to the court when it came to when, of course, the deceased was declared dead when police arrived on the scene, and in terms of how the investigation initially was undertaken. Now, as of before the lunch adjournment, what Shabane had argued or had testified before the court was that he recounted that there was an altercation between the deceased and, of course, the suspect before court, and then the suspect was rushed before hospital. Now, this is where it gets a bit murky because the timelines there seem to be questionable, and this is where, of course, even the magistrate himself then asked in terms of a summary just to clarify exactly how things happened. So the testimony of course, Constable Lakili Shabane will continue now in the next few moments as the court resumes following that lunch adjournment, and in terms of just clarifying exactly how things happened, the timeline from when the couple allegedly had the altercation to when the victim was dropped off at the Edenvale Hospital, whether or not the investigating officer did get the post-mortem is also a question that is before the court now. When the post-mortem was done and when the victim was declared dead, whether she was declared dead on arrival at the hospital or whether she died after arriving at the facility. These are some of the basic questions, and they might seem basic to the layman. Perhaps it's not as basic as it would seem, but it's questions that certainly the court would have expected the investigating officer to have been able to answer directly. And of course, just shortly before the lunch adjournment, I can tell you that the victim's mother was very, very aggrieved. She, in fact, confronted the investigating officer in question, saying, "What are you trying to do? What is happening? Why can't you answer the question?" This is before the officer then left the courtroom. So on that front, even the victim's family seeming to be very aggrieved. You could hear some howls of disbelief even from the gallery itself as some of those questions were led by the state prosecutor.
And of course, watching this with keen interest as well. I mean, the family being number one, but you've got various political parties as well as anti-gender-based violence formations.
Gender-based violence formations, political parties, particularly the economic freedom fighters out here to offer support to the family, and watching this particular process very closely. The economic freedom fighters also expressing their unhappiness with how things have been happening, because this particular matter has been postponed on several occasions before we reach this particular point where we are today. The economic freedom fighters saying that the community is up in arms, and as a political organization that is distinctly against gender-based violence, they felt that they had to be on hand to find out and to ensure that they put pressure on the court and the processes so that the process does go and does get underway, because the argument there is that justice delayed is justice denied, and there have been some murmurs also within the public gallery, and the EFF is also aware of this and saying that they are also making sure that those murmurs are not actually factual, whereby people have been alleging that the suspect before the court is a well-known gangster, allegedly, in his community, and someone who is not adverse to trying to buy his way out of trouble. There's been some very interesting discrepancies that were also alluded to in court, whereby the suspect was convicted of a very serious crime in 1 year, supposedly that was around 2015, 2016, where he was convicted of a serious crime, but at the same time, when he was supposed to be behind bars, then arrested the very same year and, convicted or tried for another crime that would be around allegedly housebreaking and attempted robbery and, with grievous bodily harm. So questions raised about how he would have slipped out or slipped through the justice system there. So the economic freedom fighters saying they are here to ensure that they keep a close and beady eye on proceedings, because there seems to be some lack of confidence within the justice system in terms of particularly how this suspect has been handled and how he seems to have a collection of serious convictions behind his belt or on his record, and yet he seems at every turn, instead of serving lengthy prison sentences that are connected with those particular alleged crimes, seems to be out and about at every turn. They say this will not happen in this particular matter.
Thank you very much, Tumaole Mohlaoli, for that report. Let's take